There is a substance so ordinary that you probably ate some today without a single thought. It sits in bowls on kitchen tables, dissolves invisibly into your coffee, hides inside almost everything on a supermarket shelf. It is cheap. It is everywhere. We barely notice it. And yet this one humble white crystal has, over the centuries, reshaped the entire world more profoundly than almost any king, any war, or any invention. It built and destroyed empires. It drove one of the largest forced migrations in human history. It enslaved millions of people. It transformed global agriculture, global trade, the human diet, and the human body itself. It made some people unimaginably rich and condemned others to short and brutal lives. Its name is sugar. And today, we are going to trace its astonishing journey from a rare and precious luxury fit for kings to the engine of slavery and empire, to the cheap, ever-present substance that now fills the modern world and the modern body to overflowing. This is the history of the sweet crystal that changed everything. Using advanced AI trained on the history of agriculture and trade, the records of the sugar plantations and the slave trade, the medical and dietary history of the modern world, and the work of historians who have traced sugar's extraordinary global impact, we have reconstructed the story of how one substance remade civilization. It begins, long ago, with a tall grass growing on a tropical island. Sugarcane, the plant from which most of the world's sugar has come, was first domesticated thousands of years ago in the islands of the South Pacific, probably in New Guinea. From there, over many centuries, the knowledge of the sweet cane and how to process it spread slowly westward into India and Southeast Asia. It was in India, more than 2,000 years ago, that people first learned to boil the juice of the cane and crystallize it into a solid, transportable form, the first true sugar. For a long time, sugar remained a rare and exotic product of the East, known to the wider world, if at all, as a strange and precious substance, more a medicine than a food. The expansion of the Islamic world spread sugarcane cultivation across the Middle East and the Mediterranean, and Arab growers refined the techniques of growing and processing it. But for the people of medieval Europe, sugar was almost unknown, and where it was known, it was a luxury of staggering rarity and expense. In medieval and early modern Europe, sugar was treated almost like a precious spice or a jewel. It was so rare and so expensive that only the very wealthiest could afford it, and they used it not as we do, but as a mark of fabulous luxury and status. Sugar was used as a medicine, prescribed by physicians for all manner of ailments. It was used as a spice, added in small, precious amounts to the dishes of the rich. And most spectacularly, it was used as a material for display. The wealthiest hosts would commission elaborate sculptures made entirely of sugar, called subtleties, molded into the shapes of animals, castles, ships, and saints, set upon the banquet table to astonish guests with the host's ability to command such an extravagant substance. To serve sugar was to announce, unmistakably, that you were rich beyond the dreams of ordinary people. A pinch of sugar was, in those days, roughly the equivalent of serving your guests a sprinkling of gold. But this was about to change, and the change would be one of the darkest in human history. The transformation began when Europeans carried sugarcane across the Atlantic to the New World. The tropical and subtropical lands of the Caribbean and of South America, especially Brazil, turned out to be perfect for growing sugarcane. European powers, Portugal, Spain, Britain, France, the Netherlands, established vast sugar plantations across these lands and discovered that there was almost unlimited money to be made supplying sugar to a European market with an ever-growing appetite for sweetness. But growing and processing sugar was brutally labor-intensive work. Cutting the cane under the tropical sun and then crushing it and boiling the juice in the infernal heat of the boiling houses was exhausting, dangerous, and deadly. The plantation owners wanted a labor force they could work to death and replace cheaply, and they found their answer in the most monstrous institution of the age. Sugar became the engine of the transatlantic slave trade. This is the darkest chapter in sugar's history, and it must be told plainly. Over roughly 4 centuries, millions upon millions of Africans were captured, sold, and shipped across the Atlantic Ocean in horrific conditions to labor as slaves in the Americas, and a very large proportion of them were destined for the sugar plantations. The sugar colonies consumed human lives at a staggering rate. The work was so brutal, the conditions so deadly, the treatment so cruel, that enslaved people on the sugar plantations died faster than they could reproduce, and the plantations relied on a constant, endless stream of new captives shipped from Africa to replace those who perished. An entire system of unimaginable cruelty, the plantation, the slave ship, the auction block, the whip, grew up to satisfy Europe's growing craving for something sweet in its tea. The wealth generated by this system was colossal. It enriched merchants, planters, bankers, and whole cities and nations. It helped finance the rise of European economies. The sweetness on the European table was paid for, directly, with the suffering and death of millions of enslaved human beings on the other side of the ocean. There is no way to tell the history of sugar, honestly, without facing this. Sugar and slavery grew up together, two halves of the same monstrous machine. And the demand that drove this machine kept growing because sugar had found its perfect partners. In the same centuries, 3 other new substances arrived in Europe and became wildly popular: tea from China, coffee from the Middle East and beyond, and chocolate from the Americas. All 3 were naturally bitter, and all 3 were transformed by sugar into something deliciously sweet. The marriage of sugar with tea, coffee, and chocolate created an explosion of demand that fed the whole terrible system. As tea drinking, in particular, spread down through the social classes in countries like Britain, becoming the drink of not just the rich but the working poor, the demand for sugar to sweeten it became enormous. Sugar was transformed over a couple of centuries from a rare luxury of kings into an everyday necessity of ordinary working people. By providing cheap calories and making bitter stimulant drinks palatable, sugar even became, in a grim way, a fuel for the workers of the new industrial age, a quick source of energy for people laboring long hours in the factories. The price of sugar fell and fell as production soared, and consumption rose to levels that would have astonished the medieval kings who once displayed it as a treasure. In time, the slave system that built the sugar empires was, after long struggle, abolished. But the world's hunger for sugar did not diminish, it only grew. New sources were found. Sugar began to be extracted not only from tropical cane, but from the sugar beet, a crop that could be grown in the cooler climates of Europe and North America, freeing sugar production from its dependence on tropical plantations. Production became industrialized on a massive scale. Sugar grew cheaper and cheaper, more and more abundant, until it became one of the cheapest sources of calories on Earth. And in the 20th century and beyond, sugar quietly conquered the modern diet in a way no medieval king could have imagined. It was added in ever-increasing quantities to an enormous range of manufactured foods and drinks, soft drinks, sweets, breakfast cereals, baked goods, sauces, and countless processed products, often in forms and amounts that consumers barely noticed. The average person in many modern countries now consumes a quantity of sugar each year that would have been almost unimaginable to their ancestors, far more than the human body ever evolved to handle. And this brings us to sugar's final transformation, from a treasure to an engine of slavery to a quiet threat to human health. The same substance that was once a precious luxury and then a cheap fuel for workers is now understood by modern medicine to be a major contributor to some of the great health crises of the modern world. Excessive sugar consumption is linked to tooth decay, to obesity, to type 2 diabetes, to heart disease, and to a range of other modern illnesses that have spread across the globe alongside the modern sugar-saturated diet. The sweet crystal that humanity craved for so long, that drove empires and enslaved millions and conquered the world's kitchens, turns out, in the enormous quantities the modern world consumes it, to be slowly damaging the very bodies that crave it. Governments now tax it, doctors warn against it, food labels track it, and still, the global appetite for sweetness, hardwired into us by an evolutionary history in which sweet things were rare and valuable, drives consumption ever onward. That was the history of sugar, the sweet crystal that reshaped the world. From a tall grass in the islands of the Pacific, to a precious medicine and a treasure of medieval kings, to the engine of the transatlantic slave trade and the great plantation empires, to the cheap everyday fuel of the industrial age, to the ever-present, half-hidden substance that now saturates the modern diet and quietly threatens the modern body. Few substances in all of history have done so much for good and for terrible ill. Sugar built fortunes and cities and economies. It also drove one of the greatest crimes in human history and now contributes to the suffering of millions. It is a reminder that the most world-changing forces in history are not always the obvious ones: the kings, the battles, the inventions. Sometimes the thing that remakes civilization is small, sweet, and sitting, unnoticed, in a bowl on your kitchen table. The next time you stir a spoonful into your coffee, you are taking part in one of the longest, strangest, and darkest stories in the history of the world.